The Assembly is now in session. Assembly Member Asajian notices the absence of a quorum. The sergeants at arms will prepare the chamber and bring in the absent members. The clerk will call the roll.
Asajian, Alejo, Allen, Amiano, Atkins, Bell, Berryhill, Block, Blumenfield, Bonilla, Bradford, Brownlee, Buchanan, Butler, Calderon, Campos, Carter, Cedillo, Chesbro, Conway, Cook, Davis, Dickinson, Donnelly, Ing, Fior, Fletcher, Fong, Fuentes, Furutani, Gaines, Galgiani, Garrick, Gatto, Gordon, Gorell, Grove, Hagman, Halderman, Hall, Harkey, Hayashi, Hernandez, Hill, Huber, Waso, Huffman, Jeffries, Jones, Knight, Lara, Logue, Lowenthal, Ma, Mansour, Mendoza, Miller, Mitchell, Monning, Morrell, Nestande, Nilsson, Norby, Olson, Pan, Perea, V. Manuel Perez, Portantino, Silva, Skinner, Smythe, Solorio, Swanson, Torres, Valadeo, Wagner, Wykowski, Williams, Yamada. Mr. Speaker.
Okay, members, the quorum is present. We ask our guests and visitors in the rear of the chamber and in the gallery to please stand for the prayer. We ask our Assembly Chaplain, Father Constantine Papadimos, to offer the day's prayer.
Good morning. Let us pray. Lord, if we had a valuable piece of jewelry, we wouldn't wear it to the gym or leave it on the kitchen sink. We would treat it carefully. We would put it in a safe place and protect it. In the same way, when we see others as valuable as you do, Lord, we would be careful in the way we talk to them. We would look for the good in them and honor them for who you made them to be. Help us, Lord, to see the value in others the way you see the value in us. Help us to delight in others with our actions and our words so that we can be an example of your love and light. Amen.
We ask our guests and visitors to remain standing and join us for the flag salute. Please join Assemblymember Garrick as he leads us in the flag salute in his very nice red coat. Mr. Garrick.
Thank you. Yes, join me in saluting our nation and our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. Reading of the previous day's journal.
Assembly Chamber, Sacramento, Tuesday, January 31st, 2012. Assembly met at 9 a.m. Honorable Fiona Moss, Speaker Pro Tem, Assembly presiding. Chief Clerk E. Dawson Wilson at the desk. Reading clerk Timothy Moore, the reading. The roll was called. Ashaji and Alejo, Allen, Amiano, Atkins, Bellberry, Hill, Block, Blumenfield, Bonilla, Bradford, Brownlee, Buchanan, Butler, Calderon, Compost, Carter, Cedillo, Chesbrough, Conway, Cook, Dickinson, Donnelly, Ing, Fear, Fletcher.
Mr. Allen moves and Mr. Hagman seconds that the reading of the previous day's journal be dispensed with. Presentations of petitions, there are none. Introduction of reference of bills will be deferred. Reports of committees will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Messages from the governor, there are none. Messages from the Senate, there are none. Motions and resolutions. The absences for the day will be read and printed in the journal. Mr. Allen, you are recognized.
Yes, Madam Speaker. Thank you. Let's come to order. I request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 45.5 to allow Speaker John Perez to have guests and photographers on the floor.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I further request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 45.5 to allow Assemblymember Cedillo to speak and adjourn in memory today.
Without objection. Okay, members, before we go to guest introductions, we are going to take up the budget bills first. So we're going to be taking up budget bills SB 81, SB 95, SB 98. I still see a lot of keys out, so members, if you could please come to the floor. We're going to take up the budget bills first. Mr. Allen, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, pursuant to Assembly Rule 63, I request unanimous consent to allow Mr. Blumenfield to move out of file order to take up Senate Bills 81, 95, and 98 for third reading. The Senate will also act on these bills today. The file item numbers are 8, 9, and 10.
Is there any objection to granting Mr. Allen's request? Seeing and hearing no objection, we will move to file item 8, SB 81. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 81 by the Senate Committee on Budget and Fiscal Review, an act relating to education finance, making an appropriation therefore to take effect immediately. Bill related to the budget.
Mr. Blumenfield.
Thank you. Members, the December budget trigger cuts eliminated the $248 million in funding for the home-to-school transportation program. This bill restores these funds, but makes an offsetting reduction from revenue-limited expenditures to achieve the same level of savings to our state budget. It's a revenue-neutral bill. When we put the home-to-school transportation on the list of trigger cuts, we were not aware of how difficult it would be for districts to implement this cut halfway through the school year. We have since heard dramatic stories about dire consequences from school districts all around the states, in red districts and blue districts, all around. It all boils down to this. Children cannot learn if they cannot get to school. That's the scenario students face in many communities if we fail to act today. I want to acknowledge that by changing how we achieve the $248 million in savings, some districts do end up losing more money than if home to school were eliminated, while other districts end up with a smaller cut. This is due in part to a 2-decade-long issue about funding equity and the home to school program, a program which has not been adjusted for population for many years. These issues will be discussed as we consider the governor's proposal to permanently eliminate the home to school program later on in the year. This bill is not about undoing that underlying inequity. This bill does not solve that problem. What this bill does is it deals with an immediate crisis where schools have not had time to react, and we're all basically asking the entire state to pitch in and try to remove some of the inequities so that we can get through this next 6 months. This is a Band-Aid on the problem, but it will allow the magnet schools to continue, allow rural kids to get to school. It's important that we pass it today, and I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Chesbro.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of SB 81. The mid-year trigger cut, which eliminated funding for home-to-school transportation, would not only create dangerous situations for children trying to get to school, but it would actually prevent some children in my district actually ever making it to school. In many areas of my district, there are no public transportation systems. There are no sidewalks for kids to walk to school. Parents would have to drive up to 3 hours each way to get their children to and from school. Very few, if any, of these parents could transport their children and keep their jobs. Many of these parents will be forced to move from these communities so that their children can attend school. In addition to the initial transportation cuts, these schools will take an additional financial hit when they lose the ADA. This is the survival of my community. That is why hundreds of parents, business leaders, teachers, and community members traveled 6 hours by bus last week to voice their opposition to this cut. The future of these communities depends on educating children and getting them to school. I urge your aye vote.
Dr. Halderman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I didn't support this original cut, and I don't support this legislation. The reason is that we are now picking winners and losers again. The children in my district who attend Fresno Unified School District are the ones who are disproportionately impacted by this bill. They are, in fact, the losers. Along with Clovis Unified School District, I oppose this bill.
Mr. Nielsen.
Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, this is a problem foisted on us by a badly done budget last year, causing triggers to be invoked. Republicans offered a budget plan that would not have required this to have happened, but it has happened. That being the case, I would argue for support for this legislation. Yes, indeed, there are some districts in California that are going to be getting a bit of a haircut for this. Not a devastating one, but a bit of a one. But if it is not passed, some districts are virtually going to be put out of business, will not be able to provide their students any way to get to school. Now, we can all argue parents, that ought to be their responsibility, yes, and some can and some cannot do that, particularly in rural areas. This is also an opportunity for some bipartisan agreement on something in a budget, notwithstanding the problems of last year that foisted this upon us. But the fiscal realities are here and the impacts are real, and they need to be dealt with, and this bill will deal with it. And I would argue that the impact to some districts that will take some reduction will not be devastating. But we are not, if we do not act, then the results will be devastating. And it's good when there are some bills related to the budget these days where there can be some bipartisan cooperation and support. I would urge an aye vote.
Mr. Alejo.
Madam Speaker and members, good morning. Members, I stand in support of this very important bill. The trigger cut that eliminated the home-to-school transportation is unconscionable. It is simply wrong to balance the budget on the backs of poor children. In my district, agriculture is the main industry, and this cut will do most harm to poor farm worker families who struggle to put food on the table so that they can create better opportunities for their children. In a rural area where thousands of farm workers go to work at 4 or 5 in the morning, school buses are, for thousands of families in my area, the only way their children can get to school. Many rural communities don't have sidewalks, and in fact, it is very dangerous for children to walk on the road to school. We've had two We've had too many children who have tragically lost their lives after being hit by a truck early in the morning during peak traffic hours. Under our state constitution, our children have a right to a free public education, but if they don't have the means to get to the classroom, then how do our children exercise that right? And when 70% of our school children are minority children, we need to consider the disparate impact that it would have on their educational rights. I think SB 81 is a fair approach to fix these injustices and immediately restore the home-to-school transportation funding. Thank you.
Mr. Berryhill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I rise in support of SB 81 as well. We have enough money to do anything we want, just not everything we want. School busing, the fact is, our schools are paid on ADA. How are rural kids going to get to school? As my colleague, Mr. Alejo, said, farm workers' kids, how are they supposed to get to school? We mandate special ed kids be bused. How is that going to affect their education? This is critical that we restore this funding. It is a priority to get our kids into school, and so I strongly urge an aye vote.
Ms. Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I, too, rise in support of SB 81. The transportation trigger cut was nothing short of devastating to rural districts and to low-income districts. And it's not devastating to the districts, it's devastating to the kids who go to school there. Education is one of our very top priorities in California. And the only way many of our kids are getting educated is by us providing a way for them to get to school. Literally, in parts of my district, you'd have to drive through ice, snow, no shoulders on either side of the road for these kids to get to school. Parents work, and they have no way to provide those transportation services. There's no other transit option that they can pursue. And so I strongly urge my colleagues to vote in favor of SB 81. This is a temporary fix just to restore until the end of the year. And I compliment the Education Coalition for coming together, recognizing the unfairness and the disproportionate way that this hurts rural children and low-income children. Yes, this isn't a perfect solution for everyone, but the Education Coalition has recognized that and has come to the table and said we can work together to fix the problems in the long-term formulas as we move forward. And that is going to be an integral part of the budget discussions as we do move forward throughout the year. So please stand up for all students today, for rural students, for low-income students, and please cast your vote in favor of SB 81 so the kids in my district can continue to be educated. Thank you.
Mr. Furutani.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Our esteemed colleague, Mr. Nielsen, referenced the ever-elusive bipartisan support for anything on this floor. I would also invoke the ever-elusive relationship between urban districts and rural districts. I speak as a member of the Los Angeles delegation and the LA Unified School District, where they would have been devastatingly effective with this issue about transportation, not only in terms of integration and desegregation issues that have defined public education in urban areas and others throughout the country, but also in the concept of safety. We have in Los Angeles areas where we have industrial bands, swatches of areas where we have oil refineries, and we have all kinds of warehouses, et cetera, et cetera. Students that live on the wrong side of those areas to get to schools in other areas have to go through all kinds of different ways to get there and endanger them, really. And so this bill is not just about a rural situation where people have to travel long distances, but also it's about safely getting our students to school where they get their education. I know there is always a sense of winners and losers when you look at the issue of cuts. But when we look at this relative to children and education, there's no winners and losers. This is about making sure all children have a chance to get the education that is their right in this state and this country. And I would add just one thing. As our chair said from the Budget Committee, this is a temporary fix. This is a Band-Aid. This does not make the issue go away. Beginning of the discussions around budget, we're going to have to talk about how we're going to get kids to school next year because the governor has eliminated it from the budget. So I urge your aye vote on this bill, and I appreciate this opportunity to have bipartisan support and also a rural and also urban coalition on this as well. Thank you.
Ms. Harkey.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this has gotten way out of line into who benefits, who loses, and whatnot. The bottom line here is that I understand the need for bipartisanship, but this party, my party, is only called in to fix a big mess after the fact. And in fact, we heard from the city of Palmdale that they don't receive much in the school bus funding, but they are going to be forced now to be cut to fund Pasadena that receives $3 million. This is a huge inequity. We should never have cut the school bus funding, and we had other options. But we just now are forced with this cram down our throats of taking from some school districts to give to others when all school districts are having a problem right now. If education is such a priority in this House, why is it that we have $13 billion of our $33 billion structural deficit owing to education? Why did we choose to do that? That's an accumulated structural deficit that will and should need to be paid back, but we don't have the money to do that. Why are we counting on phantom income to fund early health care? You know, there are choices being made every day on this floor, and for my members to say that this is a bipartisan issue and it's a solution, it's a chance to work together, I think is it's really sad, because we are not involved in the bipartisan beginning, and now to merely try to save some rural districts and some of the larger inner city districts from a fate that they didn't have to suffer, we're being asked now to cut suburban districts and those that don't receive, and so we are in fact becoming part of the school cuts, which we never authorized, never supported. So there are other ways. We know there are other ways. I would encourage members of this House to start talking to the Republican side of the aisle. Take some of our ideas. They're not bad. There's some nice ideas here. But as long as we keep getting shoved, the only solution being the left solution, and then we have to help fix it after people are obviously put out, I think is insincere. It's not bipartisan. It's just filling another hole based on a bad budget, and probably that didn't need to be. And if education's a priority, then we have a lot of work to do together in this House, because it's a priority for all of us. Thank you.
Mr. Jeffries.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I guess I need to follow along the same lines as the previous testimony. When I went back and I looked at the AB 121 floor votes to cut home-to-school transportation, it was 51 to 28. It was a completely partisan drill to cut education. It was a bad decision then. We all have bad votes throughout our term. At least some of us do on occasion. What I didn't hear today was my vote to support it from other colleagues here was a mistake when we passed AB 121. I didn't hear that from anybody today saying, you know, we probably should have never done it in the first place. But that being as it may, we're now being asked on our side of the aisle to actually make matters worse for some districts to a bill that we never supported in the first place. We're going to have winners and losers in this bill. We are going to take some school districts and make their cuts even deeper than what was done with AB 121 that on our side of the aisle didn't support to begin with. But now we're going to make it worse for some of them. Arguably, we're going to make it better for a few others that should have never got cut either. So pretty much for everybody on this floor, this is a no-win scenario. You take a bad bill that was passed, AB 121, and you make it worse for some, and you make it a little bit better for others. How about we just restore the original cuts to begin with? Why do we have to have this debate where we're going to gore one district in order to fix another? Why do we have to go that route? Why don't we just restore the funds to begin with and say AB 121 was a mistake? But instead, we're not going to do that. I encourage my colleagues, and I encourage everybody else out there who has winners and losers, just stay off of this bill. You're not going to make the situation better.
Mr. Allen.
Yes, Madam Speaker. I would just like to urge a yes vote. Essentially, what we need to do this for the children of California, and we need to look at this prospectively, not looking backwards at last year's budget. I do know that there is a bipartisan effort to work out the inequities long term. So this is a step forward. We should not be looking backward to last year's budget, put to solving this year's problems. So I urge an aye vote, and thank you.
Mr. Nastandi.
Thank you. And just to the previous point, when, as Mr. Jeffrey says, are we reading the budget bills when we vote on them? Are we taking the time to go through the budget and say, this might be a problem? This might be a huge problem for some districts. Obviously, we're not, because we're here to say, oh, don't look back in the budget. Oh, okay, just everyone blindly vote. Get the budget bill hour or two before you vote on it. Go ahead and vote for it because that's what we said to do. And then we'll fix it later. Not a good way to govern.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Blumenfield, you may close.
You know, this was supposed to be a nice bipartisan bill moving forward. I think it is, although I can't leave some of these comments unresponded to. Let's get real, people. The reason why we don't have the education is because many people in this House refused to vote for revenues. That's why the money is not there. You talk about, well, let's just restore the funding. Okay, out of what phantom money you know, are you smoking that you think you can just restore the money? Money comes from somewhere. We have to have revenues in order to have the state move forward. The majority of our budget is education money. None of us want to cut education. But if you don't have the money, it's going to be part of the solution. We're going to be faced with this question again and again. And I hope that the bipartisanship that's going to surround this bill and everybody talking about how much they love education is going to extend as we move further through this debate, and as ultimately the people of California are going to have a choice about education and education funding. The other thing I want to respond to some of the specific points that were the critiques about this bill, about that they're winners and losers. And yes, that is an unfortunate reality of this bill, is that the solution has winners and losers and the problem has winners and losers. But it's one of degree. The winners and losers in the solution of this bill are relatively small compared to the winners and losers of the underlying trigger cut, which are vastly disproportionate. And, you know, a little difference can make, a little distinction can make a big difference. It's a difference, a few inches is the difference between a haircut and decapitation. And that's what we're talking about in this bill. So I ask for your aye vote.
Okay, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Okay, clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 54, noes 4. Measure passes. Okay, sorry, members. We're going to go out of order. We're going to take file item 5, ACR 91. Clerk will read.
Assembly concurrent resolution 91 by Assemblymember Buchanan relative to American Heart Month and Wear Red Day.
Ms. Buchanan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and colleagues. I rise today to present ACR 91, which proclaims the month of February as American Heart Month, and tomorrow, February 3rd, as Wear Red Day in California. And I also want to recognize all the members who are wearing red today, particularly Assemblymember Garrick, and I love the ruby earring from Mr. Amiano. Each year, 64,670 Californians die from cardiovascular disease, stroke, and heart failure. Cardiovascular disease is the nation's leading cause of death, thank you, and the costliest disease with direct and indirect costs that are estimated to be $300 billion. Approximately 8 million women in the United States are living with heart disease, yet only 1 in 5 American women believes that heart disease is their greatest health risk. The research is clear. There are preventive strategies as well as community-based programs that will increase the survival rates of cardiovascular disease. Please join me in recognizing February 2012 as American Heart Month. by promoting education, awareness, and by encouraging citizens in your communities to learn the warnings of heart attack and stroke. I ask that the first roll be open for co-authors.
Mr. Garrick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also wanted to rise to recognize this month as American Heart Healthy Month. It's very important that all of us pay attention to this. Many of us have lost close members of our family to heart disease. But I also wanted to share with you that many of my colleagues are joining me in wearing red today. And on a just personal note, I hope this dispels the rumor that my Republican colleagues don't have a heart. And we all join in a unanimous vote on this bill.
Okay. Ms. Buchanan asked for the first roll to be open for co-authors. First roll to be open for co-authors. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. This is for co-authors. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. For the records, there are 68 co-authors. We could take a voice vote on this item. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The measure is adopted. Ms. Buchanan.
Madam Speaker, since some of the women have to leave early, I'd also like to rise to recognize, to welcome Joe Farrell, the San Ramon Valley Heart Safe Community, Greg Gilbert, the Emergency Services Manager from the town of Danville, members of the San Ramon Valley Fire Protection District, and volunteers of the American Heart Association to the Assembly Chambers. They are here today to help raise awareness about heart disease and to inspire women and men across California to take advantage of their health. The Legislative Women's Caucus, the American Heart Association, and the San Ramon Valley Heart Safe Community are co-hosting a Go Red for Women Day here in rooms 125 and 126 and are providing blood pressure and body fat screenings and educational literature. Volunteers from the San Ramon Valley Fire Protection District and the San Ramon Valley Emergency Preparedness Citizens Corps Council's Heart Safe Committee have joined us from my district to teach hands-only CPR and AED use. This training will be provided in 15 to 20-minute intervals and is open to all members, their staff, and the public. So I'd like to have you join me in welcoming them. And for the members of the Women's Caucus, if you'd like to join me in having a picture with them, since this is our sponsored event, I invite you to the back of the chambers.
Colleagues, Ms. Skinner would like to introduce a guest. Ms. Skinner.
Mr. Speaker, members, I'd like to welcome, and you can join me in welcoming, the 8th graders from Longfellow Middle School in Berkeley. Longfellow Middle is a safe, cooperative, tolerant, and nurturing community of students, staff, and teachers. They have a rigorous curriculum, and they cover 1/3 of Berkeley's student population, school student population. They're here today to make up the history class for the dual immersion program, and all of the students are bilingual English and Spanish. Thank you for being here.
Okay, we're going to go back to the file, to some of the budget bills. Next one up is file item number 9. This is SB 95. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 95 by the Senate Committee on Budget and Fiscal Review, an act relating to state cash resources, making appropriation therefore to take effect immediately. Bill related to the budget.
Mr. Blumenfield.
First, before that, I neglected to ask for immediate transmittal of SB 81. I'd like to ask for immediate transmittal of that bill.
Without clerk will note, duly noted.
Okay, thank you. SB 95, it's a cash management bill. It's a mid-year cash management bill. It allows the state to internally borrow an additional $865 million. As I was saying, it's a simple cash management bill. We've done cash management bills before. It allows the state to manage its cash flow. Specifically, we've had cash flows really every year because of our cash position, every year since I've been here. It's not the same as our spending revenue position. This is not an underlying discussion about how much we spend, how much we take in revenues. It's really all about cash flow. It's not anticipated that this bill will have any programmatic impact. Our cash situation is doing better, and this bill will help. So far this year, the state has only borrowed about $5.4 billion externally for cash purposes, which is actually far less than the $10 billion we expected to borrow when we were planning the budget last year. With that, I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Nielsen.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, this kind of bill for cash flow is typical and historic and regular around here. In many respects, necessary. But there are some problems with the approach. Such things are a product of overly optimistic budgeting, of under-anticipating revenues, of flaws in the budget process that cause and the lack of what I call litigation proofing when we do our budget, where we, by how the legislature crafts its budget, invites litigation that will enjoin some of the savings that were anticipated to accrue. We need to be a lot smarter about our budgeting. Now, to the credit of this institution and the governor, there was less of that gimmickry in the budget last year than had been before, but still an awful lot, and that's why we are suffering this problem right now. We need to really be very careful about those assumptions and incorporate that litigation proofing language in our budget. And the worst part of it is borrowing. It is borrowing. It costs us more into the future. And what are we borrowing from? Vast accruals of overtaxation of various entities that build up these obscene amounts of money in various and sundry funds that then the legislature and the governors covet to balance our budget. That's not truth in budgeting either. We need to be resolved to hold the line on the accruals of those vast and obscene amounts of money that tempt us.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague from Northern California brings up some great points about some of the flaws in our budget process and our short-term and long-term borrowing. However, this bill gives the controller back some authority that will fix a problem that we have had to deal with for many, many years during the budget process. And that is when we have encountered delays and impasses in the past, the Highway User Transportation Account has been used as leverage to acquire votes to move the budget forward. And consequently, what's happened, because the controller has not had the ability to go out and transfer money from internal accounts, major transportation projects up and down the state have been threatened and been noticed to be stopped in progress. And that is estimated to have would have cost our state close to $500 million in shutdown and startup cost on transportation projects that were ongoing because the HUDA fund would have been postponed. So I agree that this is not a perfect process. This bill would allow the controller to transfer money internally. It does not violate Proposition 22. It does not give him authority to go out and borrow externally from outside markets, but it would give him the flexibility to keep transportation projects moving and people staying worked on the job. And so I would strongly urge your support on this bill.
Ms. Harkey.
Thank you, Sir Speaker and members. I have a little bit of a different take on this, and let me tell you why. I think we're getting part of the story here. We borrow from between 600 and 700 internal accounts. This bill adds now the transportation accounts to that group of accounts that the state may borrow from. We had a $33 to $35 billion structural deficit. That is accumulated short-term cash flow budget needs that we had in 2008 when I arrived, and it is still here now in 2012. The reason being, and this is what the governor's calling his mountain of debt, we also have $91 billion that is long-term debt that has increased from about $58 billion since 2007. So we are in debt up to our ears. We are not solving our structural deficit, which is the short term, the continual ongoing. As I said before, we've got I think $13 billion owing to education, 10 in deferrals, another 3 was, I think, settle up. We've got the emergency revenue bonds that we borrowed back in 2004 that were supposed to be paid off with sales tax receipts that are still outstanding. There's a multitude of items. This internal borrowing, because we've only borrowed 5.4 from Wall Street, I believe part of the reason we only borrowed 5.4 from Wall Street is probably that's all we could get because we were relying on phantom income for our budget. Wall Street knew it. And we had to promise trigger cuts to even get that 5.4. So we've got some kind of unholy allowance between the transportation groups and the budget committee, the governor, and the controller that they have bought into this to borrow transportation dollars because previously they've been held hostage. But don't think that they won't be held hostage again. This is not going to correct our transportation or keep our projects going because we're not correcting our structural deficit. That's the immediate problem. That's the immediate mountain of debt that we need to address. And if we get any bonus revenues next year, we need to start reducing that. There are categories provided in the budget for you all. And don't forget, there's another $91 billion, a long-term debt sitting out there that we have borrowed tremendously from over the last few years for transportation projects and the like. So, we're up to here. I don't approve of this because I think we need to start moving money around in other places such that we can start reducing this wall of debt, not merely just adding to it. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Blumenfield, you may close.
Thank you. The state is doing a better job of managing cash flow than it has for the last few years. This bill enables us to deal with that in a prudent, logical way. It's not about overall revenues versus overall expenditures. This is simply about cash flow. Our revenues come in at a different time than our expenditures. Our expenditures are fairly even over the year, and our revenues come in at tax time and other key times. This allows the state to manage that logically, and I ask for your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Ayes 52, noes 16. Measure passes. Mr. Bloomfield.
I ask for immediate transmittal.
Clerk will note. Colleagues, if you would please direct your attention to Mr. Speaker at his desk as he's going to introduce some guests. Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Members, I rise to introduce the Right Honourable Francis Maude, who represents the constituency of Horsham in the British House of Commons and serves as Minister of the Cabinet Office of Paymaster General of the United Kingdom. Mr. Maude has served in the Parliament since 1983. In that time, he's held numerous posts, including Minister of State for Europe and his present posting. He's also held numerous positions as a member of the opposition front bench, including Chairman of the Conservative Party, as well as Shadow Secretary and Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. Please join me in welcoming a leader of one of California's most important partners on trade and building a healthier, more sustainable economy, the Right Honourable Francis Maude.
So we're going to stay in the regular file. We're going to move to file item 10. File item 10, which is SB 98. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 98 by the Senate Committee on Budget and Fiscal Review, an act relating to the healing arts, making appropriation therefore to take effect immediately. Bill related to the budget.
Mr. Blumenfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, the authority for the Board of Registered Nursing expired on the 1st of this year. This bill reestablishes the board with a new sunset date of January 1, 2016. Without the board, the important work of licensing, disciplinary action, and general nursing practice oversight cannot continue for the 380,000 licensed registered nurses in California. This budget trailer bill would take effect immediately, allowing the board to sunrise right away. In many respects, this is a no-brainer, members, to protect the public and preserve the integrity of our medical community. With that, I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Nielsen.
Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, this is a rather difficult vote. The Nursing Board is a noble entity, and though many Department of Consumer Affairs boards over the years have had many, many problems, and the Board of Nursing has had its share, but not egregiously so. And everybody loves our nurses, and we know that the profession deserves this Board of Nursing. It got into some problems last year, but there is a normal process for sunrising. There's a sunset review process, a lengthy one, committee hearings, deliberation, and legislation to sunrise the entity. Now, that process has somewhat been corrupted, and we'll talk about that on another occasion. But as to this, Sunrise, it makes sense, but the process does not. And when I've agonized about supporting the Sunrise of the Board of Nursing, and then agonized over the abuse of process, I've concluded that I have to vote no. Over the years, trailer bills have now become whole new budgets in themselves, whole new venues for fighting out the budget battles incessantly. There used to be a handful, maybe 5. Now we're over 20 a year of budget trailer bills. We are doing our business through budget trailer bills. Things that should have up front been dealt with deliberately in the budget. And this is not relevant to last year's budget. It has no place being included today as a trailer bill. And further, it's a bit of a perversion of the majority vote. In this particular case, we are allowing an entity to be created, and yes, though the board was around before, it is not in existence today. It is a bureau subsumed within the department. That's what happens when a board is sunsetted. And this is a way around that by a majority vote. The Constitution, and one of my colleagues is going to argue in his scholarly and very legal mind in a minute about that, but it is an end run around our Constitution which prohibits the creation of a new entity. And yes, by any definition, this is a new entity because it doesn't exist today. Those are two end runs that compromise the integrity of the institution. And though my heart is indeed with the nursing profession, the greater issue applied to this entire institution and how it is viewed and how it conducts its business demands a no vote.
Ms. Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just briefly, I rise in opposition. Again, as the Senator has reminded us, the problem is not with the Board of Nursing. The problem is the procedure that is used to put the Board of Nursing back into existence. Our Constitution tells us that an urgency statute cannot create or abolish any office. That is exactly what we are doing here. Now, we're going to be told, of course, this isn't an urgency bill, that this is just a budget bill, but the fact of the matter is, and it is important that we lay down this marker, the fact of the matter is that if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it is an urgency statute. We are urgently recreating the Board of Nursing, and that is flatly prohibited by our Constitution. It might be good policy to do this, but good policy and good intentions don't justify an end run around the people of California and their written Constitution. I urge a no vote.
Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise and urge an aye vote on this. We need this Board of Registered Nursing for patient protection. We've got over 380,000 nurses in the state. Every year, unfortunately, there's about 1,000 nurses who face disciplinary action for protection of the public and also to keep the standard for this profession. It's essential that we pass this bill today, so I urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Blumenfield, you may close.
Thank you. It was referenced, whether this falls under the urgency statute. This is not an urgency bill in that part of the Constitution. This bill, if you're looking for the constitutionality of it, would fall under Article 4, Section 12E1, which was part of Proposition 25 that was passed, which allows for these types of trailer bills to take effect immediately. That's how we're able to correct this problem. There is a direct link. It is a fee-supported entity, but it is funded through the budget. And with that, I ask for your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 53, noes 13. Measure passes. File item 7 on the amendments, SB 9. I'm sorry, Mr. Blumenfield.
Yeah, I neglected to ask for immediate transmittal of that bill as well, SB 98. Would ask for
Clerk
that.
will note. Without objection. Okay, we're going to go to file item 7, SB 9 on the amendments. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 9 with amendments by Assemblymember Cedillo.
Mr. Cedillo. Okay, passed temporarily. File item 4, ACR 85. Clerk will read.
Assembly concur in Resolution 85 by Assemblymember Mendoza relative to Indian Republic Day.
Mr. Mendoza.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, first of all, I want to congratulate Ms. Buchanan for a wonderful presentation on ACR 91. It was a very good cause for the American Heart Month, Awareness Month, and I appreciate the little red lapel pins. Great floor presentation with the resolution in camera. It's a great honor to present ACR 85, Indian Republic Day, on behalf of the South Asian community here in California. ACR 85 recognizes January 26th of 2012 as India Republic Day. Republic Day celebrates the establishment of a sovereign democratic Republic of India through the signing of its constitution, which took place in January 26th of 1950. ACR 85 reminds us that the foundation of any nation or any state lies in its people. It allows us to reflect on the many achievements of the large Indo-American community and populations here in California and in our country, including contributions in medicine, food, business, technology. In my district, specifically, Little India in Artesia is a cultural center with a large concentration of Indo-American businesses and restaurants, which is a jewel in the 56th Assembly District. Today, I ask you to please join me in acknowledging this important historical event. I ask for co-authors. Thank you so much.
Mr. Portantino.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise to commend the author for his hard work and diligence in bringing this measure to the floor. I know there was opposition to do that, and I actually have a question to the author, if I may.
Without objection.
Mr. Mendoza, was it your intention to introduce members of the Indian community at the back of the chambers?
Mr. Portantino, there's a time that he will be able to do that. We're talking on the ACR right now. Please speak to the merits of the bill.
Okay, well, I was asking the author a question. Hopefully he'll answer that in his close. I think this is a wonderful thing to do and recognize the proud contributions of Indian Americans to our great state, and I wholeheartedly support this measure, and I look forward to hearing more comments and support from the author.
Mr. Furutani.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Members, as Chair of the Asian Pacific Islander Legislative Caucus, I want to commend Mr. Mendoza for bringing this bill. Any of you that have been to Tony's district know that Pioneer Avenue is a real gathering place for the Indo-American community with, as he said, stores and restaurants, etc. It's a really vibrant community, and we have them throughout the state of California. As a matter of fact, the first Asian Pacific Islander American congressperson to be seated in 1957 was an Indo-American from California. His name was Mr. Dalip Saud, and he became a part of the House of Representatives, as I said, in 1957, representing parts of Riverside and the Imperial counties. His talent and breadth of knowledge was quickly recognized as he became a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman Saud broke barriers, and he left a mark on history for California and for the Asian Pacific Islander community. The Indo-American community is the third largest and the fourth fastest growing among the Asian Americans in the United States. You know that they have elected representatives, the governor of Louisiana, and here locally we have city council people, the vice mayor of Long Beach, Suja Lowenthal, and also we have others in the area. So I really appreciate and thank Mr. Mendoza for bringing this ACR forward. It's about time, and it's important to acknowledge the rich tapestry and diversity of our community, and the South Asian American community has not only made its mark, but will continue to grow and continue to do so. Thank you.
Mr. Wachowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise as a co-author of ACR 85, Indian Republic Day. I'm proud to represent an assembly district that has one of the highest proportion of Indian residents in the nation. Their many contributions have enriched our culture, our educational and entrepreneurial environment in the 20th Assembly District. In both the private sector and the public sector, Indo-American community has strengthened our economy, supported our schools, and have become engaged activists at all levels of government. Prior to serving here in the Assembly, I was on the Fremont City Council, and I served with Anu Natarajan, who was the first woman Indian elected to City Council. Now she serves as the interim mayor for the city of Fremont as they fill that vacancy. Through their community centers, legal and health clinics, and multi-day festivals that draw tens of thousands of people, Indo-Americans are making numerous contributions to my district and California as a whole. I'm proud to join with all the members of the Assembly acknowledging Indian Republic Day and the important contributions that Indo-Americans are making to California.
Ms. Harkey? Ms. Harkey.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I, too, rise in support of this. In our analysis, it says that maybe one group is honored over the other, and I understand that, but I think that the more that we can honor all, especially those who contribute so tremendously to the medical field in particular, to all of the educational facilities and whatnot that the Indo-Americans have done in my community, and I don't have a great preponderance of them, but you know, it's just they really strive very, very hard to achieve the American dream, to have their children highly, highly educated, and I think that's something that we need to support. I have an Indo-American actually working for me in the building, and you know, I think we should honor them all. I think any hyphenated American we ought to call American, but we ought to be honoring all that helped to make this country great, and truly Indo-Americans have done that. Thank you.
Dr. Halderman?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Mendoza, for bringing this forward. The non-resident Indian population of the United States is 2.8 million, of which in Fresno and Madera we have 15,000 non-resident Indians, and we are very proud of them. They represent the ethnicity in the United States with the top percentage to have a bachelor's degree or higher. The prominent Indian Americans I can think of offhand are the governor of South Carolina, the Honorable Nikki Haley, the governor of Louisiana, the Honorable Bobby Jindal, as well as a number of excellent staff members in this building on both sides of the aisle, including my Chief of Staff, George Andrews. Namaste.
Mr. Nielsen?
Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, I speak with heart and passion on this resolution. In 1975, the Ag Leadership Fellowship, which I was a part of, that's 30 farmers every year. You do 2 years of leadership training and developing your abilities as leaders. We traveled to several countries, one of which was India. We spent 14 days there in 1975. We went from the most impoverished village to the Taj Mahal and saw the glory of that country. The year preceding it, I did extensive study of the history of India to prepare myself to understand and to be empathetic while I was there. And on our journey, we were privileged to have 1 hour to meet with Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in her home. 30 farmers and the Prime Minister of India. That was rather incredible for me. And allow me to give you a bit of a smile and one of my favorite stories. We had rushed from Cairo to Bombay and then to Delhi and then to Agra. The intent was to get us to the Taj Mahal on Valentine's Day. We arrived at 12 o'clock at night. That would be Valentine's Eve. And our guide was able to coerce the gatekeeper to let us in to see it. We went back the next day, but we arrived on Valentine's Eve. There was a full moon. Can you imagine a full moon pouring down on the luminescence of that marble paragon of love? Shah Jahan's testimony of his love for Mumtaz Mahal. So here are 30 farmers, all men, at the Taj Mahal, Valentine's Eve, full moon. And I am standing there saying, something is missing. And I said, 30 guys, no wives. That was kind of hollow. But it is a precious and wonderful country with a rich heritage. And I am privileged to represent what I call, I guess I've self-defined it as the Punjab of America, just north of here. The rivers and the land are so important in India, particularly in the Punjab, the area that I relate so very much to and love so much, and the people there from. And this area, with the Feather and the Sacramento rivers and the alluvial soils that have poured down over the thousands of years, have created an environment very much like the Punjab, wherein those Indians who came to America to become Americans and full partners in our society have lived and contributed and enriched the land, the culture, the heritage, and in fact, very significantly, our economy. And one of my very good friends, an Ag Leadership Fellow too, Cash Gill, was the first Indian American in that whole region to be elected the mayor of Yuba City. Indeed, there is a rich heritage for a wonderful land that has incorporated and assimilated and made America far greater for all the Indian Americans who live here and produce.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Mendoza, do you want to close?
Yes, I want to thank everybody for such wonderful comments. This is the first time ever that Indian Republic Day is being celebrated on this floor. All the great comments goes to show that many of us care deeply about the Indo-American community in their respective districts, which begs to question why are my guests going to stand there and not be allowed to be presented with a resolution in the back or be taking any pictures in the back like every other group has done before on this floor.
Mr. Mendoza, you can recognize your guests in a minute. We're going to still finish and ask for co-hosts, co-authors to be on the first vote, and we still have to vote on this item.
Yes. And it's, we will recognize our guests in the back. It's just the fact that it's disappointing that I cannot give them a resolution like we did the previous group. I cannot take any pictures with them in the back, which I think it's...
Mr. Mendoza, please speak to the merits of the resolution.
Okay. And it's unfortunate that Assemblyman Calderon did not allow this to happen, but we'll have the opportunity to do it right out of here, right when we get out of here. Madam Speaker, I would like that the first roll call be open for co-authors. And as my friend Mike Davis just said a few days ago when he quoted Martin Luther King, he said that the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. And yet this shouldn't be a challenging issue. It shouldn't be a controversial issue. But yet, Len, my friends here in the back.
Thank you, Mr. Mendoza.
Are caught up in this moment. So with that, I ask for your co-authorship.
Mr. Mendoza is asking for the first roll to be open for co-authors. Co-authors, members, clerk will open the roll. It's for co-authors. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. For the record, there will be 68 co-authors. We can take a voice vote on this item. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The measure is adopted. Mr. Mendoza, you can introduce your guests.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I would like to introduce my guest. First, I would like to introduce Dalip Bhutani, who is the chair of the Indian Community of Southern California. Also, Mr. Ajoy. Thank you.
Members, can you, he's got a long list of guests. Yes. Can you just hold your applause till after he's done? Mr. Mendoza.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ajoy Dubey, who is advisor to the Federation of Indo-American Association of Southern California. We also have Anju Garg, the past president and chair of the Federation of Indian American Association of Southern California. We also have Aparna Hande, who is the current president of the Federation of Indian American Association of Southern California. We have Amrit Bandari, president of the Federation of Indian American Association of Los Angeles. We have Mohan Sharma, past president of the Federation of Indian American Association of Los Angeles. We have Kiwal Khanda, past president and chair of the Federation of Indian American Association of Southern California. We have Ramesh Bhatt, vice president of Federation of Indo-American Associations. We have, and last but not least, Harish Dhruv, founder and trustee of the United Federation of Indo-Americans of Southern California. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
If you could join us for a picture, If you could join us for a picture outside of the doors, we'll be taking pictures with our guests in the hallway, and we will also present the resolution in the hallway. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, we have one more item. We've got an amendment on file item 7, SB 9. Members, let's take care of that, and then people who want to go take pictures with our guests can go and take pictures. So let's do file item 7, SB 9 on the amendments. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 9 with amendments by Assemblymember Cedillo.
Mr. Cedillo.
Members, amendments are strictly technical in nature. They chapter out in joint language from the previous version. I ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, without objection, we can take a voice vote on these amendments. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. Out to print and back on file. That concludes the business on the daily file. I'm sorry, Mr. Blumenfield?
Yeah, I just want to announce that the Budget Committee Sub 6 will meet at 11:30 in room 4202. Sub 6, 11:30, room 4202. Thank you.
Okay. Second reading. There is no second reading. We are done with the business on the daily file. All bills will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. We have one adjourn in memory. The session schedule is as follows. Friday, February 3rd, no floor session, no check-in. Monday, February 4th, floor session at 12 noon. All other items remaining will be passed and retained. All motions shall be continued. And the request to adjourn in memory, Mr. Cedillo.
He'll do it next time.
Okay, Mr. Cedillo will do his request to adjourn in memory on Monday. Therefore, I'm ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Allen moves. Ms. Conway seconds. That this House stands adjourned until Monday, February 6th at 12 p.m. noon. Quorum calls lifted. Members, the Budget Committee will be meeting in room 437. 437, room 437, Budget Committee.